Hi, here's the next story in this list of stories of my youth. It's called The Ache in My Legs, summer of 1951. My legs were painful and showed an unusual color. I was unable to recall how I had hurt them. Neither did I have the slightest idea as to the source of the strange markings on my flesh. But lately, everything in my small corner of reality had been permeated by the feeling of being somewhat out of kilter with sequential time. My memory always seemed to be teetering on the edge of disappearance. My life seemed to be hedged around with fear, and I was unable to track down its ultimate source. The nagging feeling that there was something in my mind, something unknown, that I should be able to identify and pull into my awareness, was continuous. The heat of the day was made bearable by the presence of a soft breeze that rustled the dark leaves of the trees surrounding the far edges of our backyard. I made my brief but meaningful journey from what I called the inner backyard, which was carefully tended to and well landscaped, into the slightly sinister precincts of the outer yard, where trash was burned and where I would meet with my inner world companions. As my contact with these non-corporeal playmates began, I could feel the release of tensions and dread and a renewal of my spirit. I knew these elements of my psychic life were present for my protection and well-being, and I always felt safe in their arms, literally and figuratively. When I was with them, there was no one to rail at me about my odd behaviors. I experienced not but the gentleness and the complete acceptance of these friends, who demonstrated far better manners and much higher state of spirituality than any of the specimens of the so-called humanity with whom I had interacted with up to that time. The ache in my legs, though, was pronounced, and as I passed the white picket fence designating the point where the 2 yards met, but I paid a little mind as possible to the pain. It was a day of black crows framed by blue skies. When I reached what was affectionately dubbed the Tree of Magic, I settled down for a needed repose. Just as I sat to rubbing my legs, the world began to recede from my vision, and I felt my head hit the tree supporting my back. The first thing I noticed was the brightness of the summer day that had been replaced by the darkness of my inner consciousness. I found myself treading an unseen road through the shadowed landscape of a very strange world. I was alone and very much aware of it. The oral impression translated to me as some demonic talons slicing through the darkness in an attempt to inflict harm upon me. My head snapped around. My straining eyes attempted to penetrate the black sheets hung all around me. The little I could see contained nothing familiar, nothing to which I could relate. There was no way out. Judging by the sounds, whatever was making them seemed to be edging nearer and nearer. Their appearance remained elusive, however. Without warning, I saw red eyes piercing the black atmosphere, fixing themselves upon me. I was surrounded. The sensation of terror was paralyzing. I was unable to run or even move, like dogs or horses. That are keenly aware of my emotional reaction and respond accordingly, leaping upon me, claws slashing my skin all over. The frenzied attack ended with the same rapidity as it begun, and I found myself lying on the floor of my bedroom. I wasn't in the backyard at all. How had I gotten into the house from the backyard and had no idea at the time? It was the least of the mysteries attending the event. The red curtains blowing in the breeze and the presence of my dog, Sandy, who I loved dearly, sleeping peacefully beside me, added an air of normalcy to the entire scene. My foggy mind elongated to infinite distances to hear my mother's voice calling out, "Dinner's ready!" My green corduroy shorts and white t-shirt were somewhat disheveled. My old dirty tennis shoes seemed no worse for the experience. My shorts were wet, and my head throbbed steadily. It had happened again. And another seizure, and the events of the afternoon were lost in a fog of jumbled confusion. My family was waiting for my presence at the dinner table, so I changed my clothes, which was an imperative, before my mother came to get me, in order to avoid major trouble. I changed my underwear, pulled on a pair of Levi's, stumbled out of the room, straightening and steadying myself on the way to the table. Mom wanted to know what I was doing in my room. "Sleeping," I said. I appeased her with a kind of answer I knew she wanted to hear. I really didn't know where I had been or exactly what had happened. I couldn't even be certain which was the reality, having been in the garden or somehow made my way into the house without being intercepted, or having been in my bedroom the entire time, for that matter. Needless to say, my appetite was less than voracious. No amount of parental cajoling could get me to eat a bite. I excused myself, retired to my room, and was almost instantly asleep. One Sunday we made the post-church trip to the Forest Lawn Cemetery in Glendale, California, to see the Last Supper window and the crucifixion painting, which my parents really liked to see. I enjoyed these visits to Forest Lawn. Something about the place appealed to me. It wasn't a macabre attraction, but I did feel a definite comfort in the presence of the dead. Perhaps it was the deep quietude of the atmosphere, the tranquil, comforting feeling of eternity. Maybe I considered the dead lucky, as they had already passed through this world and left behind all of its uncertainties and pains. Their enjoyment of a better place was perpetual, unlike my brief sojourns with my special friends. My parents, of course, were always prattling about Jesus Christ, their vision of him, his death, his vicarious atonement for sins, and this wicked world, his resurrection and his ascension into heaven, where he sat at the right hand of the Father. The standard Baptist spiel, nothing original or particularly exciting, certainly nothing that enticed my interest or allegiance. I preferred being among the dead to seeking the company of the so-called alive. Somehow I was able to break away from the others and explore a long hallway near the Last Supper window. It was there that I saw what looked like a caretaker, strolling near the stained glass window in the great mausoleum. His eyes met mine. He winked at me, then busied himself with his work. I decided to follow, but my plans were thwarted by my mother, who appeared out of nowhere and pulled me back up the hall. "I wanted to talk to that man," I wailed plaintively as she guided me back towards the doors. "What man?" she asked. "The one near the window," I said. I turned and saw he was still there. "The man standing right there," I shouted, pointing directly at him. In a loud and irritating tone, she said, "There's no one there," and demanded I stop all the nonsense. Her loud voice bounced between the marble walls of the mausoleum. It finally sunk in that she was unable to see the figure that was so clearly visible to me. At home, in the aftermath of the incident, I was subjected to the fine and relentless cross-examination as anything ever played out in a court of law. To keep the peace and avoid delving into areas I did not want to discuss with my parents, and of which I had little enough understanding of my own, I lied and claimed that I made the whole thing up. It would be easier to admit to a fib than having my parents preach me another sermon about Satan and the dead and whatever else they used to track on the cottagles of such diatribes, whatever they heard in church, I suppose. As I close out the tiring of the eventful day by slipping into a very welcome sleep, the ache in my legs took second place to my thoughts, to my newly found friend at Forest Lawn. I hoped that we would meet again. These kind of incidents with my mother always perplexed me. I saw things that she didn't see. I saw things that other people didn't see. So what were they? I didn't know. Was I crazy? Was I sick? I didn't know. All I knew is that I saw these things. They frightened me at times. They loved me at times. But I always felt at peace at the conclusion of my experiences. So that's the ache in my legs, summer of 1951. And I hope you have a nice evening. See you next time.